Unit 3, Contracts and Terms. So what I'm about to share with you has come out of 10 years of thinking on the subject. It's come out of relationships and consultancies with lawyers, some of my own sensible thinking about what kind of issues I need to make sure is in my contracts, and at the same time, experiences. And really over the last 10 years, I found myself changing my contract, and that's largely because I might shoot an event, shoot a wedding, and something emerges from it that really surprised me. And I hadn't accounted for that within my paperwork. The contract's changed. Now it's quite stable. In fact, it's been quite stable for many years. So I feel in a strong position to be able to share with you what I think are all the issues that you need to consider in your own contract. So let's get started. Really what we need in our contract is first an introduction to terms. This is a kind of a legal thing where you just say, who are you referring to? So I would just define yourself as a photographer and the client as a client. So you would say, whenever this contract refers to the photographer, it's referring to my business. You could refer to your limited company or as a sole trader. And us would be the photographer, the limited company, we being the photographer, limited company. And you refer to the client as a client with a capital C. So it's just defining what the terms are. That just gives you a sense of terminology. I think you start with that. So in your contract, I think to start with, you need some sort of terms of specifics. So what we need to do is just name the couple, get their full names, both of them, get their address as well, place that on the contract. That's quite important. So names and addresses, full names. Then I think you need to put the date. So this is not just a general contract that you're just passing them. You need to actually title it to them, address it to them. So you put the date of their wedding, you put the location of their wedding. So I think you'd start the contract with one, which is the terms, as I spoke about. So who are the clients, who are you? You're referring to the specifics of the contract. Two is the package. So here you're describing what it is the client is getting from you, from your service. So you outline what you're giving to them. And then three, I think we get onto the clauses of the specifics of your contract, which is really, to start with, for me, the most important one is copyright. Let's talk about copyright. So to clear this up, lots of photographers confuse usage with copyright. As an artist, as the photographer, as the author, you will always retain and should always retain the copyright. If you actually sell your copyright, or you hand over your copyright, what you're really doing is you're handing over the intellectual property of your work. And that allows the person who owns it to resell your images, to enter them into competitions and so on and so on. This is not what you're handing over. What you're handing over is a license. You're handing over a usage. So you need to define the terms of that usage. So within the first section of your point 3, copyright, you want to say at all times, globally, you retain copyright. Then there might be a second point, like a sub-point of number 3. So it might be, let's call it 3.1. So on 3.1, you then define what is the terms of your usage. This is really up to you. What kind of license do you want to give your couples? Traditionally, in a photographic commercial context, if you were selling your work to a company who wants to use it in promotions and so on, you would actually define it by time. So it could be a year, it could be 2 years. You would also define it by region. It could be United Kingdom and Europe. Could be global. You would want to define the output. Is it online? Is it print-based? Is it public, out of doors? Are you showing these images on billboards and so on? So you need to then break those things down. But here, for my couples, it's much more simpler. I allow my couples to have unlimited usage perpetually. Here as well, you might want to think about whether or not you are licensing low res or high res. Now, this is actually crosses over with other parts of the units in the course, particularly pricing and so on. There are some photographers that say they sell low res only. High res is something you buy separately at a later date. This is like upselling. I don't practice that technique. I don't agree with that technique. My fees are high, so from my point of view, they are getting high res files. So in my contract, they retain the high res files. They then retain them to use them in their own context, so they can print them, they can use them online, and it's perpetual. In fact, they can even share them. Now, some photographers put restrictions on that they can't share them with guests, they can't crop them, and so on. So it depends on how you feel about your work as an artist. Are they these sort of frames of perfection, which you have crafted and sent out, and they have to be retained in that position? Or are you allowing them to, once they leave your studio, they're there to enjoy and use? So this is really up to you, but those are the issues you to think about. So here you want to assure your clients that you are doing everything adequate to protect their privacy. And really that's about sort of IT attacks and so on, so firewalls and so on, so that their images aren't hacked and shared. Certainly I think also within this area of copyright, this might be, you might call this 3.3, is outlining the terms of your use of the images. Certainly in early parts of your career, you should be making it clear that you retain the rights, not just copyright, but also use rights. So you can use it in your own promotion. So what we're talking about here is opposed to situations which I find myself in a lot. I'm signing NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, which prevent me from showing the work. I find this more and more increasingly in the areas I shoot in, mainly to protect families and their privacy. I'm lucky enough to be able to have built a portfolio at the level I want to before the NDA started kicking in. So though now I'm shooting many weddings I can't show, my website certainly speaks a certain type of work which reflects the work I get. You might want to say also that as the copyright owner and also having the use to use these images in your own promotion, that you might want a clause saying that you are at liberty to share those with other suppliers. And as your business grows, you might want to share style images, floral images, decor images with the venues, florists, planners, and so on. And that allows a relationship to develop, which is quite important as your business grows. I think it's important in this whole area of copyright, is talking about privacy. So you're not going to be sharing the details of the wedding. Now, some photographers do this, that they send a tweet out on their arrival to the venue saying, I'm so happy to be preparing this venue with Jack and Jill for their wedding. And suddenly you've told the public about the day you're shooting, where you're shooting, and the couple's names. Now, I never do this. I never have, in fact. You need to decide whether you think this is appropriate or not. I don't think you need to do it, but that's really something that you need to decide. I think, actually, if a planner is doing it, retweet it. If a venue's doing it, retweet it. But do you want to be the first supplier to reveal the details of the wedding? And I think if your contract says that you keep the details of a wedding private, I think you need to maintain that. So your conduct needs to reflect your paperwork. So I think you need to say something about what might happen if you cancel, what might happen if they cancel. So in the unlikely event that you cancel, I think you need to say something about that you're able to do so and you will lose that deposit. I think that has to be a standard if you're cancelling, but there'll be no further liability. I think that needs to be quite cleared, that there's a refund. I don't think it's a good idea. I've never done it. I think it's very bad image. It's a bad reputation. You take a booking and you cancel it. Certainly, if it's a week or two and you've double booked and you've made a mistake, then that's understandable. But if you've taken the booking and 6 months later you get an inquiry for a booking that's 5 times as much, in my view, you always honour that booking. I believe in karma, and I think if you start to reject the bookings you have because new bookings have come in and you start cancelling work, I think this is a really bad approach, and this will lead to a bad reputation and bad PR. Having said that, there are situations, and it's happened to me probably 4 times in my career in the last 10 years, where couples have cancelled me after they've booked. So I think you need to be clear that deposits are non-refundable. I think that's standard. Okay, so the question is, what kind of deposit are you looking for? So again, it's up to you. I have a 30% deposit on booking, followed by a 70% balance 30 days before the wedding. You might want to consider full fees, and some photographers do that. I have done that in the past, where you say, well, actually, I will offer a full fee and I will offer that at a discount if they're paying in advance, and maybe that might be 18 months in advance, and suddenly you find that there's a bit of income that you can use, and you might use that for an investment in marketing or a wedding fair, a stand or so on, or equipment. But if you're taking full fees, I think your contract needs to reflect that that is not returnable either. So if they cancel, there is no deposit, it is a full fee, and it's not refundable. Legally, you don't have to give them anything back, but is that fair? Is that right? You've taken a full fee 18 months in advance, 3 months later, the wedding's cancelled. There's still 16 months left. Do you retain that whole fee? Again, it's worth thinking about case to case. There might be a situation where you say, well, I don't legally have to give you this money back, but be very kind about it and say, well, I actually really feel for you, and I'm sure because they've split up or whatever the context is, that you'd love to be put forward again for when they get married, or when your daughter, when your son does finally get married, and you would like to refund 40%, 50%, something like this, whatever feels right to you. I just think that kind of marketing, that kind of relationship is important, because in the end, you've got to think long term rather than short term. That what will happen is they will come back. Okay, you've retained 50% from a wedding that didn't happen, but they've come back a later date for a new booking, and once again, you've got a full fee, or maybe you say, I throw in this, I throw in that, because you have this kind relationship with them. It's worth thinking about. I think you need to be clear too what kind of obligation you've given to them around retaining their files in your system. I don't think it's reasonable for them to expect you to keep those pictures forever. You're not an online storage system, nor are you a physical storage system. And these things add up physically as well. And it costs money to back up and back up. So I think you need to make it clear in your contracts that you will retain them for a certain amount of time. Now I say 12 months. Couples get the pictures, and I will keep those pictures on file in my own archive for 12 months. Do I keep them longer? Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But legally speaking, I'm saying that after 12 months, they're being deleted. So it's important for them to know that the copy they get, and I'll come to that later, what kind of copies, but the copy they get is theirs, and the obligation for them is to back it up, because they can't come back to you in 3 years' time and expect you to have them. There's also that question about your own archive systems, and the more you shoot, what do you do? So if you are keeping them for a long time, and lots of photographers do keep them, not just because they want to have that thing where they say, yes, actually I still have them from 5 years ago, but they just want a journey. They want a documentation, a trajectory of their shoots over their career. And that's fair enough. Why would you want to delete all your work? But then at the same time, if you're shooting RAWs and you shoot a wedding with 3,000 photos, and you're giving 500 to the couple, and the 500 pictures have been signed off and approved and everyone's happy, and it's 3 years later, why are you keeping 2,500 pictures that you don't need when you only gave 500? So it's worth thinking that maybe there's a system where you can tidy your filing by retaining the RAWs of the 500, deleting the 2,500. So then you're shortening the space that these weddings are taking in your own archives. I think you need in your clause a question of what happens if you don't make it. So let's just say that you're ill, there's an accident, there's a disaster, you break your arm or something like this. This could be a month before, 6 weeks before, it could be, hopefully it isn't on the day. But let's just say there is an issue. I think you need some sort of clause about what that necessarily means for the client. Here, you might put a clause that says that you have a team. And if you do have a team, then this would be the most obvious thing to say, that a member of your team will shoot the wedding on your behalf. Then I think if they are then booking someone who's not exactly you, I would argue, would have a right to approve that. So I think you need some kind of portfolio to show them, some kind of set of images from your nominated photographers to show. So if there's 2 months to go and you've broken your arm and you can't shoot the wedding, and I think then you need to be able to say, this is the photographer I recommend. He's worked with me, she's worked with me for a long time, show their portfolio of work. And if that's not approved, then I think they should be obliged to have their deposit back. That's my view on that. I think you need a clause on equipment. Technology fails, cards fail, cameras fail. So I think you need to say something about that what happens in the event of a technical malfunction of your equipment. So I think deal with them separately. So I think you need to assure them that if a camera breaks, you have another camera. So I think you need multiple cameras. I take 4 to 5 cameras per shoot. And I remember many years ago that I picked up a camera in my old days of DSLR, and I was working with mirror cameras, and I pressed the button and the camera rattled, and the mirror had fallen off inside the mechanism and the camera didn't work. And I was in the prep, I pulled it up and it shook, and I couldn't believe it. I was shocked. I went white. But I laughed. The moment passed and I laughed to myself as I reached down into my pack, pulled up my backup body, and I still had a third backup body. So I still could shoot with 2 cameras. I I think you need that. I think you need to invest in multiple bodies. You do not want a situation where you found that your prime camera's broke and you don't have a camera. Imagine it. Awful. So I think you need to assure couples in your contract about equipment failure and backup bodies. The other one that's more complicated is the failure of memory cards. I think you need to go to great lengths to maintain that their pictures will be protected on the memory cards, but in the unlikely event of a card malfunctioned, you're not liable. Now, a way around this, in these days with the cameras, is that you can put multiple cards in the body and shoot them on 2 different cards. So in theory, if a car goes down, you've got a backup card, you've not lost anything. So this is what I practice, and I think that's the best way to go. I know it's more cards, more storage and so on, but once you've downloaded that card, the second card just carries on as a backup. You don't need to keep it, you don't need to download it twice. So it just makes sense to consider the fact, and in the old days, it had happened to me on 2 or 3 shoots where cards have gone down and I've lost pictures. Now, I back up as I shoot. So even if it did go down, I've got the backup card. I think you need to, in your contract, just be clear about what it is that they're getting. So are they getting an online gallery? What kind of online gallery is this? Are they getting a print sales in the gallery? How long is that print sales active for? Are they getting a USB? How will that USB arrive? And importantly, a time scale. So I think you need to say, you'll get your pictures in 3 weeks, in 4 weeks, in 6 weeks. Make it clear and make sure you deliver it. And I always think, if you say you're getting your pictures in 6 weeks, then you give their pictures in 3 weeks. So you always surprise them. Don't take it to 6 and say, oh, my contract says 6, I'll take it to 6. Or they email you on 5 and say, where is it? And they're chasing you. Say it's 6, but deliver it on 3. I think in your contract also, you need to say something about what kind of work you're giving them. So are you converting images to black and white? And if so, what kind of proportion should they be expecting? So I say something like 30 to 40% will be converted at my discretion as the photographer, as the artist. I rarely have a situation where couples come back and say, can I have everything in color? Or I'm not sure about this or that. If it does happen, I'll handle it and deal with it case to case. But most of the time, couples accept my decisions and my choices about what converts into black and white. And of course, as the artist, you know why. It could be framing, it could be coloring, casting and so on. Why the black and white is a stronger option. Now, I find over the years that couples confuse the word edit with retouch. So I always clarify and say an edit is the selection, it's the culling, it's that process of narrowing down. And I never ever tell them how many I took. So if I took 3,000 or 4,000, or I have a team of 4 photographers and we've taken 12,000 and it's a 3-day wedding and so on, and you've got thousands and thousands of pictures, I never say that this is the amount you've got. And the reason I say that and never tell them is that if you start to say I took 20,000 over 3 days, then they will then question, well, what about the other 18? I only got 2,000. Why did we discard so many? So I think it's best not to say how many you took in general discussions after the wedding, but at the same time, I think it's clear in your contract how you process them. So what kind of retouch work do you do? This should really be reflected in your work. So if it is a very fashion style look, a highly retouched look, then those images need to reflect that. If it's a documentary approach, then those images that you're passing through back to them needs to reflect that. If a couple comes back and say, can you retouch the spot on my head? Can you airbrush my skin? Can you thin my arms? Can you move this person from the picture? If you get these advanced retouch questions, then I think your contract needs to be clear about what that really means. If it's not clear, you find yourself in a kind of grey area with hours of possible work trying to then work out what is reasonable. So I think be clear. So in my contracts, I say I will crop, I will sharpen, I would deal with lights and darks, exposure, I would deal with color balancing, sharpness, and so on. So I'm dealing at that level. I'm not talking about advanced retouching. And I say in the contract, if there's any further retouching, I'll deal with it case to case with a quote. I think in your contract also, you need to be clear about what kind of approach you're taking on the day in terms of the photographic style. And maybe there's a clause about that in your contract. So let's call it clause 5 for now. So here you're potentially referring to what you're going to shoot, what you're not going to shoot. If your website is populated with photographs of people because you're a pure documentary photographer and you call yourself a storyteller, and as a storyteller, you're not concentrating on details. So when you look at a website, there is not one detail. I think it needs to be clear that you don't shoot detail. So you need to put that on your contract, that you are a documentary photographer, you capture the essence of the day unfolding in a natural way. And if there are any design aspects or any styling that's important, you need to inform you. So you've just covered yourself. If you just engaged in the shoot and you're concentrating on the people and you do this every week, and then they come back afterwards and say, where's this and where's that, and you don't have it, at least you say, look, it's in my contract that I don't shoot tables, I only shoot the people. My website's all people. So at least you've got some kind of protection. In my view, you need to shoot everything. I always shoot the tables, I always shoot the styling, I always shoot the details. And that's not just to make sure that it's covered, and that I've got that work for myself, and that potentially that relationship with the suppliers, but because publications want details. You need to say something that will protect you if something's missed. There could be an expectation that you're like God's eye, that you capture everything and you miss nothing, and that the work should reflect that. And if you're shooting on your own, then actually that's quite difficult. It's potentially unfeasible for you to capture everything. So I think in your contract you need to say this, that you can't be liable for missed moments or missed things. I think the key things, obviously the kiss and the ceremony in the aisle and all these kinds of moments, I think are a given. But I think you do need to say something about that in your paperwork. I think also it's worth putting in our contract that while you endeavour to capture as many people as possible, you cannot be liable if certain people are missed. Some weddings are hundreds of guests. Some guests might arrive late, leave early. Some guests might not like having their photograph taken. There's all sorts of different situations. And I think, especially in a big wedding, in a big ballroom wedding, and tables are spread in different places, it might be hard to capture everyone across the space. So I think in your paperwork, it's worth saying that you cannot guarantee that everyone will be photographed. But if it's important, there's certain people who are important that are outside of the wedding party, because of course the wedding party should all be covered. That front row in the ceremony, the prep rooms, you get to see who are the key people. But if there are other people, someone that's flown over, or godfather, godmother, who is important to the couple, then you need to know who they are, you need to know where they're sitting, so you can capture them. The possibility is that couples will upgrade their albums in terms of pages, and in terms of size, and in terms of the amount of albums. So I think you need to say something about what are those standard fees. I think you don't want to be shocking couples afterwards when you send them an email afterwards and say, well, it's going to cost another $500 for this couple. It's going to cost £30 for another page of a book, and so on. So I think just have it in a contract. So you could say, I mean, actually, it's never really happened to me, but you could say, actually, it is in the contract. These are the costs of the album. I have heard stories where photographers have received quite negative feedback when they've gone through the expenses of new designs and extra pages in albums. So I think it's best to be transparent as possible, as early as possible. Another point, which for me is a really important one, is feeding the photographer. And I, in fact, wrote a blog about this issue. Normally, it's absolutely fine. I've only maybe three times in my career, but sometimes it's still a struggle when you're on a day and you don't know where you're supposed to be fed. You don't know when you're going to be fed. You don't know what you're going to be fed, especially if you've got dietary requirements as well. So there's all of these issues that playing on your mind while you're shooting. You need sustenance. It's a long shoot, 12 hours, 14 hours, 16 hours. Even a standard shoot of around 8 hours, you should be expected to be fed. So I think that needs to be in your paperwork, and I think it needs to be clear what you want. So in my case, I always ask for a hot meal for myself and every member of my team. I think it's important to pause, to have a hot meal, to get your sustenance back before you move on. And I think you should be making that clear in your contracts. In the unfortunate event that you need to bring your contract up on the day, and it's happened to me once or twice, I found that couples are really quite collegial and almost mortified that they hadn't considered it. In your planning, if you get this right, you don't need to bring this up on the day because you've already gone through all these details with the couple long before the wedding. So just send that email, get it in writing, just to confirm the week before that you're being fed, that you and your team are all having a hot meal.